I'm going to tell you a little bit about Johnny Copelyn, who is going to be joining me in just a moment. He was banned by the apartheid state in 1976 for organizing textile workers. Now, if you recall what was going on in 1976, that's the year of the Soweto riots. Textiles was a huge industry in South Africa. There was a gentleman called Philip Frame. Don't know if anybody in the audience will remember Philip Frame, but it was one of the first cover stories that I wrote for a magazine called The Executive, which kind of came and went in a very short period of time. I guess it's because they actually paid properly, which is most unusual amongst publications at that time. And they paid on time, which was even more unusual. But it was fascinating to learn about this guy, Philip Frame, who had a number of listed companies and textile plants in KwaZulu-Natal. And the way that the late Mr. Frame made his money was not really by promoting human capital. It wasn't unleashing human potential. He had completely the different idea. And so I can just imagine how difficult Johnny's job must have been there, on top of which, of course, the apartheid government didn't take too kindly to workers being organized. It was only later that the Vian Commission came along and that things got more sensible on that front. Anyway, with that background, you can understand why he was, when the ANC came to power in 1994, he was in Nelson Mandela's grouping. He was elected to parliament. And 3 years later, he swapped the National Assembly for the boardroom. He took a investment fund, a very small investment fund, and we'll get the exact detail in a moment, and he turned it into HCI, which today is worth well over 10 billion rand. He started off with R1 million. HCI was the holding company of IGI. And those of you who've been around for a while will remember there was IGI was at the bottom end of Moy Street in Johannesburg, which is where Investec was born. There were 5 guys who were starting this leasing company called Investec: Ian Cantor, his brother Bernard, Errol Grolman, Stephen Kossef, and forget the last one, but I'm sure it'll come to me. And that they then started that, and I got to know them quite well because I worked just up the road at the Rand Daily Mail at the old SAN building, which was 2 blocks away. And they gave away, they fed a hungry young journalist. So I quite liked going along and learning at the feet of Ian Cantor, who was a great South African entrepreneur who had to leave the country because of family reasons, also during the apartheid era. But together they built what is now an extraordinary organization. But it's ironic to me that IGI, which was controlled by HCI, both of those, IGI I think went bust, HCI became a cash shell, and that's what we now still know today as Hoskin Consolidated Investments, which was from Larry Nestat was the other one. Larry's still very busy here in South Africa, and it was Larry's family and various others. It's just interesting when you look back into the history, because then you can see the future, or you can certainly see the way that things have happened. And Johnny's got a different view. He played to his strengths. Warren Buffett says the most important thing is to know our circle of competence and play within our circle of competence. And Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger both say that's their secret sauce. Well, as you'll hear from our conversation, that's also been Johnny's secret sauce in creating this extraordinary return on investment for the Trade Unions Investment Fund, which did not plunder the assets of the members. It actually took a little bit of investment and then turned it by using the advantages that they have. But what I really like about this story is that he is 10 years ahead of us on the oil and gas opportunity. He has invested and stayed with it in a oil and gas prospect off Namibia, which is not far away from producing its first oil. And my goodness, when that happens, it'll be turbocharged. I must thank Piet Viljoen for, in the first instance, pointing me towards HCI and to an entrepreneur that he says has been very much under the radar, but one of the true greats here in South Africa. Let's welcome Johnny Copelyn.
This BizNews production is brought to you by Brenthurst Wealth, the leader in offshore investing, connecting South Africa to opportunities worldwide. Invest better with Brenthurst.
I suggested an anthem for you of Bob Dylan, Times Are A-Changing. He said, no, you want this one. Here Comes the Sun.
It's just that I like it.
But it's optimistic.
I am, yeah.
And optimistic, you're optimistic in, if you think about what you've been through, starting off with the trade union movement, with the textile workers. 76 times were not easy then. How do you keep your optimism going?
I've been graced with great luck from timing point of view. People before me went into the trade union movement. They all got their heads bashed and they didn't come out with anything. I got into just at the right time, in the 70s when South Africa was changing fast enough to give the unions a real opportunity to grow. And I agree with that. So I just got in at the right time. I think I got out of them at the right time as well. I went into politics, into government backbenching. I was very sort of proud to be a member of parliament and be in Mandela's government. It seemed to be a fulfillment of all the dreams I'd had of building a non-racial society. When we adopted the constitution, I left. I feel it was the right time to leave. I still feel I was very lucky to be in it and lucky to be out of it. And then I got into business, and now I'm about to get out of business. I feel that it's all been very, very lucky timing for me.
In my intro, I had a line which said one of his last public appearances as CEO of HCI. But I was hoping that our conversation last night might have changed your mind. Warren Buffett's only retired at 95, and he actually broke his own rule where he said the retirement age at Berkshire is 103. You're nowhere near that.
Anyway, listen, everybody must do what they like in life. I feel I'm sort of young enough to start a fourth chapter. I'm really enthusiastic to do it, So one of these days I'll let go. I expect that to be, maybe a year from now, something like that.
Are you going to keep involved with HCI?
Yeah, I'll stay on the board as a non-exec of HCI. I love HCI. I would sort of walk away from it. All my money is in it, or a large part of my money is in it. So I don't intend selling it or doing anything with it, really, other than just watching over how other people manage it after I've left.
But you've played within your circle of competence. You've looked at a particular investment approach, and it's really worked out incredibly well for you. Explain what that approach is.
I am interested listening to comments that people make about BEE. And I get it. There's a lot of corruption and a lot of the same names repeating themselves as there for the next handout and so on. I get all the problems with it. But, we come from a society where Black people were excluded from the economy other than at the labor level. And any non-racial society can't live like that. So, it seemed to me unavoidable from day one. The most urgent thing to do was to change the racial split between rich and poor. If you couldn't get blacks into the economy, the notion of having a non-racial society is impossible. So affirmative programs of one kind or another just seemed to be a must. And we were a black trade union. We were a mass organization. We had 180,000 members at the time. And, it seemed to us that we were the logical beneficiaries of that largesse. We would be the right kind of movement to take advantage of that opportunity. There were others that were there as well. Church organizations, for example, had a very similar approach. also mass organization. Everybody's a member of a church somewhere, and these types of organizations seem to us to be really deservedly the people that should flourish. When you come to the actual business opportunities, I would say the one thing about white South African business at the time is they were incredibly anxious about the new government. Any business with political risk, they ran 100 miles from. And we didn't see it that way. We saw those as the opportunities for us. There were licenses being given out for a new television company. We grabbed that with both hands. Radio licenses, mining rights, all the mining laws were changed. Old order rights, new order rights, had to be black to get a new mining license. These were all opportunities that just seemed to us to be absolutely designed for us, and we grabbed them with both hands. Piece of Vodacom, we start with 5% of that. These were the most fortunate times for anybody who was prepared to embrace a new regime.
Tell us about the Vodacom story.
So what happened, I forget exactly the year, perhaps 92, 93, somewhere there. De Klerk's government, in its final hours, issued 2 licenses, one to Vodacom and one to MTN. And these licenses became the subject of a big discussion in the trade union movement. And it was seen to be selling the family silver. Just at the moment that we were going to take over the government, like suddenly the government was being excluded from, the most important thing, control over communication. And the union movement then objected to this. There were a series, we got the ANC, we were in alliance with the ANC. Cyril Ramaphosa was the ANC representative. We all got to a point of saying, look, the ANC should announce that when it takes over government, it's setting aside these licenses. We're not just going to honor these licenses. And it was a big hoo-ha at the time. And the consequence of it all was that there was a meeting between Johan Rupert as part of Vodacom and a few other people involved with the licenses. I presume Koos Becker must have been there on the MTN side. And a deal was struck. They kept the trade union people out in the cold. They took Cyril on the other side, and they cut a deal with Cyril, which was that, look, we give the trade unions 5% of this thing. And but then all this argument about the license got to stop. So it came back to the union movement as the opportunity to take a 5% stake in these things. And as you can imagine, there was a big ideological discussion about, is that what we want? We want to be part of the system, or we against the system, or what are we, And I would say a very minority element within it, but my union in particular just felt, listen, this is absolutely ideal. What do you want? If we get 5% of Vodacom, we go for it. And that's really where we managed to start. We got an option from Johan and from Vodafone that we could buy 5% from them at the cost price with interest. So essentially they gave us an option which amounted to lending us the money until we could sort ourselves out. I don't know if he's here in the audience, but he was the guy that really helped us, was Gert Gous. I saw him here. He was at the IDC. They lent us the money and we were in. So I would say we had really a great start in this thing. And turning my nose up at BEE, I would say it's sort of, kicking the system that fed us at the beginning.
But there have been, and just digress very briefly, there's been a lot of controversy around BEE. How did you manage to steer clear of that?
Well, I mean, there are different controversies in different sections of the world. The controversy in the union movement is that there's a great disdain for what they call business unionism. It's unions that are not committed to socialism. They're not committed to communism. They're just trying to get a better wage or something like that. And I guess we've been branded that way. I probably see trade unions that way myself. I've looked at unions in Russia. People like Tomsky, who was the sort of head of the unions in the Soviet Union in its day. I mean, they're all just government appointees. They're not elected by workers of any kind. I went to when the Berlin Wall fell. We went to Prague, perhaps 1990, and I was listening to a group of clothing workers who were begging the previous owner, who'd had their business confiscated from them in 1946. They were begging this previous owner to come back, because if the previous owner claimed ownership of the factory, they would be free of the state. And, as you listen to people and you sort of realize, look, their experience over the next 40 years wasn't great. And, when I said to them, but look, like, well, isn't the person but old by now, 50 years later? It was a husband and wife team that had a clothing factory. The husband had died. The wife was in her 80s, and she was saying, "Look, I couldn't take on a responsibility like this. I'm too old." And they were saying, "Listen, we'll be no trouble at all." When I think of sort of how militant shop stewards that we'd come with, hearing all this, it's quite an eye opener for me, and I would say, probably for that reason, I'm in that sense business union orientated.
And you've shown that it can work, and indeed it has worked. How have your members benefited from the approach that you took?
The thing about business is, I mean, everybody that's spoken on the platform before us has said the same, so there's nothing new. But, business is about making money, and it has a logic to it. It's not just a charity. And if you can't play the game properly, then you can't make any money out of it. And it's not a handout game. It's a tough game. And I would say for us, choosing opportunities, building them into businesses that are real and making money, has a lot of tricky pieces to it. I mean, just to give you an obvious example, we took over Golden Arrow buses. It's the scheduled bus company providing bus services in Cape Town. And it has been attacked absolutely mercilessly by the taxi industry. It's a subsidized industry. The taxis are not subsidized. They feel most aggrieved at all this, Now, when you get into a business like that, it's not an easy business to be involved in. And we, over the last 20 years, have survived in it. But from time to time, you have clashes. You have workers who on strike for wages. The first thing they do is they run to my union, the textile union, and say, like, you own this thing. How can you treat us like this? These are all, I would say, great difficulties in being a union investment company with a real union behind you, and trying to operate within a capitalist system. So, we've had different problems from the sort of problems that other people have.
I'd like you to just, if you don't mind, develop that conversation on the taxis and the Golden Arrow, because talking to Rob Hudson from Thirsty, from my town, my hometown, Newcastle, he said they were transporting their workers from the township areas where most of them worked to Normandie, where most of them lived, to Normandie, where they worked. And they were attacked by the taxis who wanted, and they had kind of a company bus, for want of a better term. They were attacked, but proper violence. And he said he stood firm and won out in the end. How did you handle that? Because I'm pretty sure that there are many in the audience and many watching this video who will be faced with similar challenges from criminality, because I don't think you could call it anything other than that.
Look, the bus business is a tough business. We've got about 1,000 buses. we regard as normal if we lose 12 buses a year to arson. And that's what normal is in South Africa. Now, you're insured, you have political risk cover, you have all these things, you get by. But somewhere, the terrible part of it is the person who pays for the 12 buses is the passenger. That's the way the system works. If you need to buy extra buses that are simply burnt like that, you put your fares up. That's like the structure of the thing. So, the people who are hurt by this stuff is not particularly us, it's the passenger. And I would say, yeah, that's very difficult and very hard to work within. And these movements, they creep up at any moment. You can have some issue that they want new toilets and they haven't got the toilets, so there's garbage problems, or I don't know, whatever, potholes in the road. Something got absolutely nothing to do with our business. The first thing they do is they burn a bus. Now, that'll be on the front page of the newspaper. There's a protest and there's a bus burnt, a big picture of the bus burning. Now, you're in that world. This is a frontier economy. It's like walking, it's like being a big shot in New York and taking a trip out west in the stagecoach, and you arrive and you walk into the saloon and everybody's looking at you in your 3-piece waistcoat, and all they see is you don't have a gun. And you can look at them the way you want to look at them. You can think they're all ruffians and whatever they are. But if you can't learn to play in that world, then you mustn't enter it. And I would say, I think we've done well. We don't look for trouble. We avoid trouble where we can. We certainly don't allow our buses to get burned out without taking the most steps we can. And I would say we've done well in the bus company, probably better than anybody else would have done who was less, let's call it, politically committed. One of the big reasons, one of the big differences between us and other people that might own it is clothing workers used to, in their heyday in Cape Town, they used to be the main users of the buses. So you have an interest in public transport that I would say is probably a little deeper than other businesses might be. It's not just the money, it's the actual service that interests us.
Licenses, though, generally has been your sweet spot. You mentioned television. It wasn't an easy ride.
Licenses has been everything for us. It's state contracts like the bus company, it's television, radio, mining, oil exploration. They're all licenses, and you all put your hand up and say, can I have the license? There's a tender, there's whatever it is, you put your hand up for it. And it takes you into startups. So, from a business point of view, you got to be happy with startups. The thing about our circumstances were we didn't have any capital. So buying a ready-made business was impossible. So the startup was the sort of natural starting point for it. It took us time to realize you got to put a lot of money into a startup, just as much as you were paid to buy a really going business, and you got to build it. Building, I would say, we've never built a startup to a point of breaking even in less than 6 years. So you got 6 years of cash negative, horrendous stuff, and a lot of them is more. The oil, for example, we got into it in 2013. Yeah, 13 years later, we haven't seen a drop of oil yet. And the earliest, the Namibian one that you spoke about, that's let's say the quickest to oil is that one. It's still 4 years away. So it'll be 17 years of plodding along cash negative before you see any money. So unless to be honest, if you're a trader, if you want to see the results next week of the money you invested this week, this is not the game for you. But I would say over the long term, I've been sort of hacking away at this now for almost 30 years. When I look at where we started and where we are, we have done well. We started at 2.50 was where HCI was when we got into it. It's 170 or something now. So it's a good 15% per annum, that escalation. And, that's not looking at dividends, and we've unbundled a lot of stuff. And, I'm sure it's more than 15% that we've made. But it's certainly not made on the basis of, buying cheap and selling expensive and getting your money back quickly. Most of it is debt funded. I would say, debt's probably the most dangerous thing you can play with. I heard Darby Root say he just loves money, but when you got to borrow it, it doesn't have the same effect on you, they say, like, you fly over a medieval town and you look down and you see a beautiful building. What is it? It's a church. You fly over a modern town, you look down a beautiful building and you say, well, what is it? It's a bank. And, somehow banks do amazingly well. And, you got to be very careful with it. But, so far we've done okay. We've built all these businesses mainly on debt. And we've come away with much more than we started with.
But you're in an aeroplane and you're looking down and you're seeing the bank headquarters and they are licensed. You don't have a bank, though.
We did, though. We had a funny thing, all these ideas that people have, they sort of, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, right? One of our so-called failures was there was a bank called Unibank, and it was, I presume Uni came from the Union of South Africa or something like that, but Uni for us was a good name. And the guy in charge of it had this idea that he would like to develop Unibank as a Robin Hood bank. Most banks take deposits from salaried people, working people, and they lend to the rich. And he wanted to build his bank on a basis of taking deposits from the rich and lending to the poor. And to our union members, this was the ideal bank, So we bought a big stake in this bank, and he was going to, do all sorts of wonders. Textile workers must have borrowed 100 million rand from this bank for housing loans of one kind or another. And, as we were in it, we suddenly realized, like, there's a part of the report you get at the board is what they call the mismatch of funds. And it's like, how much of your deposits are short-term deposits and how much of your lending, or how much of your assets are long-term assets. And, you suddenly realize every asset you've got is a 20-year loan to somebody, and every deposit you've got to cover it is like a 24-hour money on call basis. And, when I sort of woke up to how it worked, we just had to get out. We got out, and, to my amazement, a few months later, even though I feel we saw the problem before it happened, but, somewhere there was this Y2K scare, and people came to the view that if you've got money in a small bank on the 31st of December 1999, something terrible could happen to you. And people started withdrawing all their savings all their overnight deposits out of little banks, and it immediately went bankrupt. And we had fortunately sold our stake, but we had given a profit warranty. And the profit warranty said that we would get shares in a company that we'd sold to, or had to pay in, depending on whether we made this profit warranty. And what happens when a bank goes bankrupt like this, particularly a little one, is the Reserve Bank steps in to save it, and they start lending you money, and they lend Unibank money at rates that were far cheaper than the normal deposit rates that they were paying. So as much as it was in a mess, it became more profitable, and we said, well, look, we didn't guarantee that it wouldn't go bankrupt. We just said that it wouldn't go illiquid, let's say, but we just guaranteed the profits. And, at the end, they had to pay us an absolute fortune in the warranty just to get rid of us. So, you stumble into odd things that you certainly didn't plan, but banking has not been our great source of strength, for sure.
What has been? What if you were to identify your best investment over the past 30 years?
HCI is a combination of two things, right? It is businesses that we have invested in quite some time ago, and they produce cash. and we use that cash to invest in startups or cash negative opportunities. And that's the balance, and where it always goes wrong is, your eyes are always bigger than your stomach, and you always see more opportunities than you have money for, and you make up the difference with debt. And that's the sort of way that the business has been run for 30 years. So the thing about businesses that are the cash side of our business, you need good businesses, you need stable businesses, you need businesses that are not sort of up and down all the time. And we've been really fortunate enough to get into fantastic businesses. We've got into Sun Sun's Hotel. I'm so glad you're here with us. But Sun Sun's Hotel is a great business. We've got into the casino business, a very cash generative business. We've got into television, which likewise been very cash generative. Coal mining, been very cash generative. These are all great opportunities that sustain our ability to invest in new things. The new things, I suppose, A, you've got to be lucky, and B, you've got to have some idea where you're going. I have been very keen to focus HCI on energy assets. We've got lots of things that we do in that space, but probably the most prominent of which is the oil exploration. We've got involved with what they call gold hydrogen, which really for me is the most interesting area. It's most sort of interested to hear Sasol talking about green and grey hydrogen, but we've taken a punt on drilling wells that will release hydrogen, and there's no process that you have to, split water or split methane to get the hydrogen on its own. You just find it on its own in a well. And I would say, it's not a big capital investment, but it's an exciting idea. If that succeeds, I'd say it's an interesting development.
Gold hydrogen. Now,
Yeah.
it's the first time I've heard that, which doesn't say much because I don't really know the area. But could you explain what the difference is between what Simon Baloyi was telling us of green and grey?
Sasol, by the way, doing the same as us. He just didn't mention it. It's like small and opportunistic. The difference between Sasol, of course, and us is, if they do 100, we do 1. So I mean, we don't have to have the science that they need, but hydrogen is found all over. It's in water, it's in methane, it's in it's in everything, and but it's not usually it was believed that it's not usually found on its own, but there are formations that release hydrogen if they're exposed to air, and the consequence is you can drill a well and you can be in the suitable substance, and it will release the hydrogen on its own. And there are wells that have been discovered like that. People were not looking for hydrogen, they're looking for something else, but they recorded 90% of what was released was hydrogen. And secondly, it's unlike oil. Oil is formed over hundreds of millions of years, and it gets trapped in let's call it a cave. And, you can test how much oil there is. You can see it's a huge resource or it's a small one. Hydrogen is not like that. It becomes free at the moment of its exposing. So you can't see how long it will continue for. You can't see its flow rate. You can't see anything. So the kinds of people that are interested in this, I'd say, are the sort of American venture funds and HCI. And it's a long shot, but I love these sort of long shots. They're exciting, and we've got into different parts of it. We've in a platinum business that has a battery development system. The question is, can you use normal catalytic substances, the PGMs? Can you use those to enhance the rechargeability and the flow of energy within a battery. And what coatings do you have to dip the anode and cathode into to make them more useful? Now, all of these things, they're all part of decarbonizing energy. I would say anybody who's interested in energy, unless you're just blind to global warming, has got to be interested in other forms of making energy. But it doesn't detract from the main point. The main point being 80% of the world's energy comes today from fossil fuels. And it ain't going to change tomorrow. It doesn't matter what you say. And, I think that the way that Simon Below put it is absolutely right. You have to have a balance. You have to try and, get more involved in renewables and slowly decrease your carbon emitting things. And part of it will be moving from coal to oil and gas. But the notion that we'll have renewable electricity charges in townships where people park their electric cars and charge overnight, I think we are many decades from that. So, I think that all these sort of efforts to get into the energy game and to release more efficiently opportunities to have our own energy. I think, if you're very sort of prissy about carbon emissions, I don't think you can be a valuable player. And I do want HCI, small as it may be, to be realistic in its contribution.
If you have a look at the geology of Namibia, where you are, down the Cape Coast, I've been told it's identical. And then across the east coast of South Africa, there are also proven oil and gas prospects, but something's stopping it. Something's stopping us here from exploiting this incredible resource, which the Namibians are running full tilt at and have been described as the great oil and gas district of the world right now. What is stopping us, and what might change so that this will be unleashed?
Just to tell you a biblical story, Jews were slaves in Egypt, and they were absolutely keen to get their freedom. And eventually, a few plagues later, they were given supposedly their freedom. And as they started to leave Egypt, there are a whole series of points in the Bible where they reached a point where they couldn't go any further. They reached another point they didn't have any food. All these, and every time that there was a problem, there was a crowd led by a fellow, Abiram, I think is his name, would be moaning, Moses, you've brought us out now. Where have you got us to? This is worse than it was before. We should go back and whatever, And the question is, what does it mean to struggle for freedom? People want freedom, and what do you get? You get democracy. And democracy is something different from freedom, and you can squeal and moan as much as you like in a democracy. That's the whole point about it. In South Africa, greatest constitution in the world, we were all very enthusiastic about it, stop the state from just arresting people arbitrarily and whatever. Terrific. But the consequence of it is people have rights to go to court. And the Green lobby is a very big, interesting lobby. They block all efforts to get into fossil fuels. We, for example, wanted to do a seismic study in the Transkei, and we had done one already. We were doing now a more detailed 3D seismic, and they brought a case to court which said we had not consulted enough with the local population. They had people who had drowned at sea, and their ancestors were in the sea, and this was a disturbance to them and intolerable. And the court upheld their point of view, and here we are 4 years later, something like that, waiting for a constitutional court decision as to whether we can go forward or not. And, so you say it's a 4-year waste. Like, whose fault is that? That's what democracy is. You either have the right to obstruct and object to things you don't like, or state must just run it the way they want it. So that's by the way, tomorrow is the final Constitutional Court judgment is coming out tomorrow. So we're all sitting at the edge of our seats waiting to see, are we in this game, are we out of it? But so that's one. The second one, obviously, is a government that is, I don't know how to say this, ineffective or ambivalent or unhelpful in getting the process to get on with it. And, I'm amazed at it. I mean, for example, 2 wells were drilled offshore Mossel Bay, and they found 5 trillion cubic feet of gas. This is enough to run, if you put it into electricity, it's enough to run 3 gigs of electricity for 20 years. So it's a sizable commercial find. It's not the biggest in the world and whatever, but it's sizable and it's local. When you say, well, they did that, I think in 21, here we are 5 years later. Yeah. Total eventually got so frustrated that they abandoned it. We were a teeny player. I think we had an effective 1.8% stake in this thing. And everybody else walked away. The Qataris walked away. Total walked away. The Canadians walked away. We were just left as the Black Empowerment Group. And everybody said, look, you're just wasting your time here. But I don't believe that. 5 trillion cubic feet of gas offshore Mossel Bay, and you walk away. Total's got a lot of other things that they can walk to. They can say, well, it's not as good as some other thing. We don't have other opportunities. So, we must make this one work. And if we succeed in getting a production right, which I hope we will wind up as a party with effectively control of a listed company that owns 75% of that opportunity. Now, if it all works out, everyone will say, oh, Copelyn is so brilliant. If it doesn't work out, they say, oh, God, that guy is way past it. We have a critic from a crowd called Active Management that's been on. He's 75 years old. Now I'm 76, he's past his sell-by date. He hasn't done a good deal in 10 years, The best thing is just unbundle everything, But if you unbundle everything, that's the end of this one because it's got no money. You have to put money in it if you want to get to the end of the road. So we stand sort of to be judged by all these things in the future. But I do think that it's criminal to talk about a gas cliff in 31 that you've now drilled every last little add-on drilling you can do in Mozambique to keep from the gas cliff being earlier. And you're sitting with a huge resource like this that you can develop in 5 years. You could get this thing going in 5 years. It'll be the end of the gas cliff.
Is this the Brillputter field?
Yeah.
Field? Wow. That's a huge, in a South African context, asset that you now own because everybody else walked away?
Yeah, absolutely.
And has there been any movement from government on that?
Well, when you apply for a production right, there are 2 pieces to the process. The one is an environmental matter, and the other is Tugwedi, just for the production right. The place which always gets caught in litigation is the environmental piece. And the Ministry of Environment is a DA appointee. So, bitch, moan, it's not the ANC this time, it's the DA. They had this guy, Dion George, there, refused to meet with us. He said, no, look, he would be dirtying his hands if he met with us because we are an applicant. And he's got to be the judge. He can't be meeting with applicants. So he didn't have one single meeting with us. We went to Helen Zula and said, is this your policy? Don't engage with business in opportunities that they're trying to develop. She said, no, look, I'll talk to him. Anyway, thank God, he got pushed out for entirely unrelated reasons to us. But it's not. I don't know what it is. There is no sense of urgency in this thing. There isn't a feeling that now look, we got to get on and make this thing happen. And I think that is a great pity.
Even with the new minister?
Well, he's new. Let's see where he goes. We're in the process of applying now. I would say, we'll certainly engage with him as best we can. But, the processes are long and whatever it is, you've got to promise the world that you won't disturb fishing and you won't do this. And it's all lined up to be a court case to stop you. And, when you look at a place like Norway, they're known for two things. Oil and fish. Those are two things that go together. In South Africa, every person want to do a seismic study. Every whale for the whole continent, get died, beached on the spot. So there is an obsessiveness with this thing that is, I would say, very inhibiting and to some extent really unfortunate.
So let's just say that the new minister were to meet with you or understand the urgency of this, given the gas cliff. And what would he do then? Or what could he do? Could he issue a license, and then would the people who are upset about these things take you to court?
Yeah, they will, unquestionably. And if they lose, they will appeal. If we lose, we'll appeal. So you can be certain of one thing: this thing is going to take a while to get through all the litigation involved. But it is worth pursuing. What you can't do, with timelines, with court cases, is to set timelines. You can't be in a rush. You have to plod along and do what it takes. And these things are time consuming, and it's true, it's frustrating. And it would be nice to say, but if I were president, I would, but it's not possible to solve it like that unless you don't want to be a democracy.
But how's Namibia got it right?
Well, been fortunate up to now, but have they got it right? They were supposed to conclude their negotiations with Total by the end of July, which would release the first development. That development is 160,000 barrels of oil a day from the time that it's done. It's a $8-9 billion investment. But they haven't been able to reach agreement on terms. Now, you can say, well, government's got to care for the population as a whole, and Total is just trying to rip the guts out of these things. But Total runs all over the world. They have projects all over the world. For example, I think the South African government thought they would never walk away from Mossel Bay. They had put $400 million into it. $400 million, they make $48 billion a year. We work out how many days profit that is, set them back 3 days or something like that, they're not in the same game as other people. Namibia is a teeny little pimple in their world. For Namibia, it's quite the opposite. The taxes that they would earn off just this single well probably would add 30% to their corpus. I mean, it will transform Namibia once oil gets
30% to the income that they get every
year. You work it out. I mean, 160,000 barrels a day times 365 days in a year. I don't know, it gives you 50-60 billion. 40% of that probably goes to the state. It's just enormous numbers with this oil and gas stuff, And I don't say the government is wrong. They've got to do the best they can. But somewhere, disputes are what happen when people are too aggressive in their negotiating. And settlements happen when people are more realistic. You don't have to be a trade unionist to know that. The collaboration that Simon Valoy was talking about is what makes the thing work. Somewhere they have to find accommodation and get on with it, but they haven't. August, Europeans go on holiday, so Total is on holiday. They don't do anything in August, so now you wait till September. Can you keep all the contracts that they had lined up to build an FPSO and bring rigs out? So can they keep those open for months without conclusion? I think it's a very dangerous game. You can find that they put this thing on a back burner, take another year or two before it gets going again. So, all of these things, I would say for HCI, they're absolutely massive risks. I mean, if you take the Venus one on its own,
That's Namibia.
that's Namibia, right? So, and it's just one prospect in a bigger thing. So it's the first of several opportunities. I would say our hope is that you will get oil in 4 years from now. What it'll do to HCI, probably double our revenue. And that is even while we're paying back debt on this thing. But, it gets postponed a year, it gets postponed a year. What can you do? You're not so clever as you thought you were, but it'll come through at some point, and if you're patient enough, I think it will work out in the end. Likewise, South Africa, the Transkei as an example, we have 2 blocks that virtually make up the whole basin of the Transkei. We've done some studies already. We can see ourselves as prospective and more than the Orange River Basin one. But, from now to the time that you can drill a well, it could be 2 years, could be 5 years.
What's happened in other countries that have got similar prospects to South Africa? Did they just start a long time before? Norway as an instance.
You look at Angola as an example. I think President had a daughter who's in charge of the oil
The silver
state oil thing. She's now accused of stealing billions from the country. I don't know. These things they have their own complexities. But fact of the matter, they got a lot of oil. They've drilled it. They've been in the business for a long time. If not for that, Angola would be a lot poorer than it is. And I don't mean to detract, from criticisms. I mean, Shell in the Delta of Nigeria, for example, is accused endlessly of just destroying entire areas of forestry and so on. But when you really look at how that happens, it comes from piping it to shore and people drilling holes in their pipe to steal oil. Now, I don't know. All of these things have ups and downs, and I'm not trying to suggest that the oil industry doesn't have enormous responsibility to clean up messes that they're making. You look at something like that BP thing in the Gulf. I mean, it's just shocking. But if you want to have electricity, if you want to have petrol in your car, these are the things that you have to live with in some way, and you have to put pressure on people to be environmentally sensitive as best they can. And I would say, look, all of this is pretty controversial for HCI. It's pretty controversial for a trade union like SACTU to have to bear the responsibility if there were to be an oil spill in Transkei. You can imagine. But either you just want to import everything. South Africa today imports probably 20-25% of what we import is oil. It's either crude or it's refined. And as all the refineries are going bust, more and more of it will be refined. Now, if that's your energy arrangement, it is truly threatening that. You can't have transport if you don't have a source of oil. And I would say when you sit with all these resources in your ocean, I think it's not good for growth of the country. It's not good for jobs. It's not good for wealth. Not good for state programs of assisting the poor. It's not good for anything to just simply sit and import oil.
Yeah, and you have a look at what's going on in Mozambique, with to the north of Mozambique, those prospects there, which are also going to transform that economy and turbocharge it. And I was just wondering on this, how does, I suppose, apart from, first of all, educating, and you have educated a lot of us on what's happening there, but maybe chivying on those who make the decisions, because it does appear as though it's fairly lackadaisical. There's not a heck of a lot of pressure at the moment to start making these things happen. And you wonder if that had happened with, say, the gold rush, if the gold rush would even have occurred in South Africa.
Look, what I can say is this: is that in life, certainly in business, nothing is easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. Everybody knows it takes a certain kind of hardiness, certain kind of resilience. It's come up a lot in the conference that makes people stick with ideas of growth. And I think that HCI has been a good contributor to it. I think it's been a good beneficiary of the BE policy. It is a broad-based constituency. It hasn't stolen the money. I don't say it's had the most brilliant ideas of how to use the money, but hasn't stolen it, and it's made good contributions. There's a time we were putting probably 1,000 people through tertiary education a year before the state introduced one of Zuma's final things. The state will pay for tertiary education. We moved on to other things. We do boreholes in rural communities all over the show, providing water to people who, competing with cows to get water out of a river 5 kilometers from their homes or whatever it is, carry it by bucket. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that's being done and good use being made of the opportunities we've got. I think that for a clothing worker today, they all know that their children university fees are paid for. Why? Because they're members of a union. Now, I think that's a good contribution by an organization to its people. So, and it's not limited to union members only. It's extended to the communities they come from. We, for example, through union clinics, have circumcised over 100,000 children in clinics. Now, you say, well, so what? But people die in those things. So I think these are all good contributions.
Are you happy that you've done what you could? Do you feel I've had a good career, and that's part of the reason why you want to leave the stage?
No, like no one. I feel you can always do more, and I really have had one of the most enjoyable jobs in HCI. It's been successful, and the thing about HCI is we don't invest twice in the same industry. So if we have a hotel group here, if somebody approaches me with a hotel opportunity, I pass it to the hotel group. Either they take it or they don't, but I don't do hotels from HCI level. So you're constantly looking now in new industries that you know nothing about and looking for opportunities to invest in them. And I'm too old to do the AI stuff. I don't say I don't use it all the time in my own primitive way, but investing in stuff like that, I find off-putting. It's beyond my means. So the things that I wound up doing are manufacturing, mining. We've done fishing. We've done KWV, sort of farming and processing of farm stuff. We did clover. We've done very basic industries, and I've had a great opportunity given to me, and the fact that the union has sort of backed me through all my trials and tribulations all this time has been a blessing.
You've also been ahead of the game, ahead of your time with share buybacks, for instance. Now this was something I didn't realize, but when you showed me the context, won't you explain what a share buyback is in the first place, and secondly, what HCI has done and why?
The thing about holding companies is they trade at a discount, and it's not. I don't think it's anything to do with the company itself. It's you take Remgro or any of these things. PSG was the same when it was a holding company. They all traded enormous discounts to their underlying value, and there are good reasons and bad reasons for that. But the issue is that buying your own shares back at that discounted price is often a very attractive investment. So, at our height in HCI, we were a company with 431 million shares in issue. Today, as we're sitting effectively, we're a company with 71 million shares in issue. So over the years, over 29 years or whatever that we've been involved, we have systematically bought back shares from time to time. And today, probably only a sixth of the shares that were once in issue are still in issue. So, people say, but, you should have hung on to your 5% stake in Vodacom and gone fishing for all the 29 years. You'd have done it right. But it's not quite true. I mean, I'm not that interested in fishing, but Vodacom today is about 300 and something billion rand company. We had 5% of it. So it would have been about 15 billion. You bought back 5/6 of the shares, so you would have only had, you would have less than 1% of it. You'd have less than 3 billion. And instead you've got 12, 14 billion. And if you look through and get rid of the discounts, then you've got a lot more. So I think that, over the years we've outperformed the market over the period that I've been in it. And even if we hadn't, I'd say, for a broad-based black empowerment group like a trade union to create jobs for large numbers of other people. I mean, today HCI's got probably a little over 20,000 people that work for its subsidiaries. And I think that that's, a laudable contribution by a trade union to building the country.
Tony Copelyn, thank you. This has been absolutely fascinating. And you are in our Ricardo portfolio, and we certainly won't be selling your shares anytime soon. Thank you.
Well, good luck.
This BizNews production is brought to you by Brenthurst Wealth. Building wealth and protecting legacy since 2004. Invest better with Brenthurst. Start your day a step ahead. BizNews Insider. It delivers the business stories that matter every morning straight to your inbox. Sharp, fast, and free. Subscribe now.